Welcome to this video, where we explore creatine and pregnancy. Creatine is a familiar supplement for athletes, but its role during pregnancy is a newer conversation. Throughout this presentation, we will look at what creatine does in the body, how the phosphocreatine system works, why energy demands change during pregnancy, and what the science says so far about supplementing during this time. I also want to remind you that this video is for educational purposes only. It is not medical advice. Always speak with your obstetrician or another qualified health professional before starting or stopping any supplement. We will cover potential benefits, unknowns, safety considerations, dosing guidelines for adults, and practical steps if you and your doctor decide creatine is right for you. Let us begin by asking why this topic has become so popular on social media. Lately, creatine has been trending in online forums for expecting mothers. It is easy to see how the promise of more energy and brain benefits could appeal during pregnancy. However, popularity does not equal proof. Social media can amplify anecdotes before science catches up. In this video, we will separate the facts from the hype. We will look at what is known from research and where knowledge gaps remain. Remember that individual experiences shared on social media should not replace evidence-based guidance. Pregnancy involves complex changes to metabolism, so any supplement needs careful consideration and professional oversight. Creatine is a naturally occurring compound made from the amino acids arginine, glycine, and methionine. About half of your total creatine comes from a diet rich in meat and fish, and the rest is manufactured by your liver, kidneys, and pancreas. Around 95% of this creatine is stored in skeletal muscle, where it acts as a rapid energy buffer. In recent years, it has also been studied for brain health and cognitive performance. Because of its established role in athletics and its reputation for being safe in healthy adults, some expecting mothers wonder if it could support energy or recovery during pregnancy. Before jumping to conclusions, we need to understand how creatine works and how pregnancy changes the equation. Animal studies suggest creatine may protect the fetus from oxygen deprivation and support organ function. These findings have sparked excitement, but we have to remember that preclinical results do not always translate to humans. To date, there are very few studies testing creatine in pregnant people, and no large randomized controlled trials. We also do not have established dosing guidelines for pregnancy, and the long-term effects on mothers and babies are unknown. That is why it is essential to consult an obstetrician or midwife before considering creatine during pregnancy. As we walk through the evidence, keep in mind that promising science and social media enthusiasm are not a substitute for rigorous clinical research. To understand why creatine is useful, we need to look at cellular energy. The body's immediate energy currency is adenosine triphosphate, or ATP. During intense activity, ATP is broken down quickly to fuel muscle contractions. Creatine partners with a phosphate group to form phosphocreatine. This phosphocreatine can donate its phosphate back to adenosine diphosphate to regenerate ATP almost instantly. This reaction is catalyzed by enzymes called creatine kinases. The phosphocreatine system acts like a rechargeable battery that keeps energy flowing during short bursts of high demand. About 2/3 of the creatine in muscle exists as phosphocreatine. Although the body can make its own creatine, stores are limited, which is why diet and supplementation have become popular for athletes. Most of the body's creatine resides inside skeletal muscle cells. Approximately 95% of total creatine is found there. The remaining 5% is distributed among the heart, brain, and other organs. Within muscle, about 2/3 of the creatine pool exists as phosphocreatine. This high-energy compound sits ready to donate a phosphate group to regenerate ATP when demand increases suddenly. Because muscles rely heavily on this system, athletes and bodybuilders have been using creatine supplements for decades to improve performance. The brain and heart also depend on phosphocreatine for rapid energy buffering, which is why researchers are now looking into its role during pregnancy when the placenta and fetal organs undergo rapid growth. Phosphocreatine is essentially a charged battery that releases its energy when needed. When a muscle fiber fires or a nerve cell sends a signal, ATP levels drop almost. Creatine kinase then transfers the phosphate from phosphocreatine back to adenosine diphosphate, rebuilding ATP in a fraction of a second. This reaction is reversible and occurs both over time and across space. Ingredient: it smooths out energy fluctuations and helps shuttle high-energy phosphate from where it is made in the mitochondria to where it is used in the cell. Phosphocreatine's buffering role is critical in tissues with variable energy demands such as skeletal muscle, heart muscle, neurons, and, as emerging research suggests, the placenta. Understanding this system will help us evaluate whether supplementing creatine could support maternal and fetal energy needs. To visualize how energy moves within a cell, imagine the mitochondria as the power plants and the cytosol as the factory floor. Creatine travels into the mitochondria and accepts a phosphate group to become phosphocreatine. Because phosphocreatine is smaller and more mobile than ATP, it can diffuse through the cell to locations where energy is needed. Creatine kinase, located in the cytosol, then transfers the phosphate from phosphocreatine back to adenosine diphosphate, regenerating ATP locally. This shuttle system allows high-energy phosphate to be transported efficiently within the cell and ensures that ATP stores are maintained at critical sites. In the placenta, different creatine kinase isoforms may help move energy from maternal blood to fetal tissues, but this has mostly been studied in animals. Pregnancy is a period of rapid growth and profound physiological change. A developing fetus, a growing placenta, and adaptations in maternal tissues all require extra energy. Basal metabolic rate rises noticeably, and the body adjusts how it uses carbohydrates, fats, and proteins to prioritize fetal development. Hormones such as progesterone and human placental lactogen influence nutrient metabolism. These changes raise the question of whether additional nutritional support, such as creatine, could help meet the increased demands. However, we need to examine these questions carefully because pregnancy also increases sensitivity to potential side effects and changes how the body handles supplements. During pregnancy, your body must supply energy for your own organs, the growing placenta, and the developing fetus. Health guidelines recommend no additional calories in the first trimester, around 340 extra calories per day in the second trimester, and about 450 extra calories per day in the third trimester. Basal metabolism increases as early as the first trimester and peaks between about 10 and 30 weeks when the fetus is growing most rapidly. These numbers are approximate and vary by individual. Eating nutrient-dense foods and following prenatal care recommendations are the primary ways to meet these needs. Whether creatine supplementation could aid energy metabolism in pregnancy is an open question that requires more research. The human placenta is not just a passive organ, it is metabolically active. Studies have shown that term placenta expresses arginine glycine, aminotransferase, and guanidinoacetate methyltransferase, the two enzymes needed to synthesize creatine. The placenta also expresses the creatine transporter, meaning it can import creatine from maternal blood. Experiments using placental tissue ex vivo have detected production of guanidinoacetate and creatine, suggesting the placenta can make and possibly store its own creatine. These findings hint at a local phosphocreatine system in the placenta that could support fetal energy needs. However, this research is still in early stages, and we do not yet know whether supplementing the mother meaningfully increases placental creatine stores. Creatine does not stay confined to one compartment. In theory, it could be produced by the mother, transported across the placenta, and taken up by fetal tissues, helping to maintain energy balance throughout the unit. A major motivation for studying creatine in pregnancy is to see if increasing maternal stores could protect the fetal brain and other organs during temporary oxygen shortages, such as those that occur during labor or complications. Scientists are investigating how creatine is transported to the fetus, how much the placenta synthesizes, and whether supplementation can increase fetal creatine levels. Much of this work is preclinical or observational, so for now we can only say that creatine may play a role in maternal, placental, and fetal energy homeostasis. Now that we have covered the basics, let us see what the research says. There are two main lines of evidence: observational studies that measure creatine and its precursor guanidinoacetate during pregnancy, and preclinical studies where creatine was supplemented in animal models. There is a very limited number of human trials assessing pharmacokinetics or safety, and none large enough to draw conclusions. Remember that our goal is to understand what is known, what is promising, and what remains speculative. We will start with the metabolism studies and then look at the animal research on neuroprotection and multi-organ effects. A prospective cohort study followed pregnant women across gestation and measured levels of creatine and its precursor, guanidinoacetate, in blood and urine. The purpose was to understand how creatine homeostasis adapts during pregnancy, not to test supplementation. Researchers found that plasma creatine concentrations remained relatively stable throughout pregnancy, but urinary creatine decreased late in gestation. Plasma guanidinoacetate concentrations dropped during mid-pregnancy and then rose later, while urinary guanidinoacetate showed the opposite pattern. These findings suggest the body adjusts creatine synthesis and conservation to meet the growing energy demands of the fetus and placenta. The study did not investigate creatine supplementation, so it provides no evidence that taking creatine improves outcomes. Looking more closely at the cohort data, the researchers observed that plasma creatine concentrations did not change much from early to late pregnancy, indicating that maternal tissues maintain creatine homeostasis despite increased energy demands. However, urinary creatine excretion dropped in the third trimester, suggesting that the body may conserve creatine as pregnancy progresses. Plasma guanidinoacetate levels fell during the second trimester and then climbed again in the third trimester, while urinary guanidinoacetate followed the opposite pattern. There were no associations between creatine levels and infant growth metrics. This highlights that the maternal creatine system is tightly regulated during pregnancy. Any consideration of supplementation must take into account these natural adjustments. Animal studies provide insight into how creatine might protect the fetus during periods of low oxygen, such as complicated labor. In ex vivo brain tissue studies, creatine supplementation preserved ATP levels and reduced markers of neural injury after simulated oxygen deprivation. In a spiny mouse model of birth asphyxia, pregnant females given creatine produced offspring with higher survival rates. The treatment reduced brain swelling and improved neuronal function, decreasing seizures, inflammation, and cell death. These results are compelling because hypoxic injury is a major cause of neonatal brain damage. However, these benefits have only been demonstrated in laboratory settings in animal models. Human pregnancies are far more complex, and we cannot assume the same degree of protection without rigorous clinical trials. Beyond the brain, creatine appears to safeguard other organs in animal models. In a study of birth asphyxia, offspring from creatine-supplemented mothers had a 17% higher survival rate overall, with particularly strong protection for male pups. Creatine prevented long-term reductions in diaphragm muscle fiber size and preserved skeletal muscle integrity. Another study found that maternal creatine supplementation reduced markers of acute kidney injury after hypoxic events, suggesting a protective effect on the kidneys. Together, these results indicate that creatine may confer systemic resilience during oxygen deprivation. That said, these are findings in animals. Human physiology is different, and we need well-designed trials before we can say that creatine protects multiple organs in human babies. To summarize the proposed benefits of creatine during pregnancy, it could help maintain ATP and support fetal energy during periods of low oxygen. It might enhance placental energy metabolism. It may offer neuroprotection and multi-organ protection, and it could support maternal energy and postpartum recovery. These benefits come from animal studies and theoretical reasoning. At this point, they remain possibilities rather than proven outcomes. In the next slides, we will unpack each potential benefit in more detail so you can understand the science behind them and why caution is warranted. One of the most compelling hypotheses is that creatine could help protect the fetus during transient drops in oxygen. During hypoxia, the brain and heart quickly run low on ATP. Having a larger pool of creatine might allow cells to keep making ATP a little longer, potentially reducing injury. In animal models, maternal creatine supplementation has been shown to prevent seizure activity and improve neurological outcomes after birth asphyxia. However, no human studies have tested whether creatine supplementation in pregnancy reduces brain injury or improves cardiac function after hypoxic events. Until such studies are done, this remains an intriguing but unproven possibility. Because the placenta expresses creatine synthesizing enzymes in the transporter, it likely has its own phosphocreatine system to buffer energy. Some scientists have proposed that supplementing the mother could increase the placental creatine pool, thereby supporting fetal energy supply during stress. This idea is based on the observation that placental tissue can produce guanidinoacetate and creatine. At this stage, there is no direct evidence that maternal supplementation raises placental creatine concentrations or improves placental function. Future research will need to measure placental creatine after supplementation and determine if any clinical benefits result. Until then, enhancing placental energy metabolism with creatine remains a hypothesis. As we discussed, animal experiments demonstrate that maternal creatine supplementation reduces brain swelling, improves neuronal outcomes, and increases survival after birth asphyxia. Additional studies found protection of the diaphragm and skeletal muscle and reductions in markers of acute kidney injury. These results suggest that creatine could offer broad protection during periods of oxygen stress. However, all of these findings come from controlled laboratory environments. Human pregnancies involve many variables, including differences in metabolism, genetics, and medical care. Therefore, the idea that creatine protects multiple organs during labor or pregnancy complications remains speculative Always consult with your healthcare team rather than assuming that findings in mice or spiny mice apply to humans. Some proponents suggest that creatine could help pregnant people meet increased energy demands and support muscle maintenance. In healthy adults, 3 to 5 grams of creatine monohydrate per day is often used to improve strength and reduce fatigue. This supplement might also benefit postpartum recovery by aiding muscle replenishment and helping new parents cope with sleep deprivation. However, these ideas have not been tested in pregnant populations. We do not know how pregnancy alters creatine metabolism or whether typical adult doses are appropriate. Without clinical trials, we cannot recommend creatine for maternal energy or postpartum recovery. If you are feeling fatigued during pregnancy or after birth, discuss your symptoms with your healthcare provider to rule out nutritional deficiencies or other underlying causes. Before considering any supplement during pregnancy, safety should be the top priority. Pregnancy is a unique physiological state where both the mother and developing baby can be affected by exposures. There is insufficient evidence to say creatine is safe for routine use in pregnancy. The Cleveland Clinic notes that there is not enough data to determine whether creatine is safe for pregnant or breastfeeding individuals. Creatine supplements can cause gastrointestinal upset or muscle cramping in some people, and very high doses may affect kidney function. Quality control is also an issue because supplements are not regulated as strictly as medications. For anyone with kidney disease or other medical conditions, creatine should only be taken under medical supervision. Despite the popularity of creatine among athletes, we lack robust data on its use in pregnancy. There are no controlled clinical trials that evaluate dosing, efficacy, or safety for pregnant individuals. One small open-label study assessed creatine pharmacokinetics in the third trimester and found that a dose of 5 grams taken 3 to 4 times per day achieved steady state without major adverse events. But the sample was small, and the study was not designed to assess outcomes. We do not know how creatine supplementation might affect maternal kidney function during pregnancy. More importantly, there are no long-term follow-up data on infants exposed to creatine in utero. Until well-designed studies address these questions, creatine should be considered investigational for pregnancy. With so much uncertainty, self-experimentation is not advised. If you are pregnant or planning to become pregnant, discuss creatine and all other supplements with your obstetrician or midwife before making changes. Your provider can consider your overall health, diet, exercise level, and any medications to determine whether creatine is appropriate. It is also important to look at the bigger picture. Creatine is just one piece of a broader nutrition and supplement plan. Taking multiple supplements without guidance can lead to interactions or excessive intake. When you do choose supplements, select brands that undergo third-party testing for purity and potency. If you are considering creatine, here are a few practical steps. First, schedule an appointment with your healthcare provider to discuss your interest. Bring a list of all supplements and medications you are currently taking. Second, review your diet and make sure you are meeting increased caloric and nutrient needs through food. Supplements should complement, not replace, a balanced diet. Third, ask your provider whether creatine fits into your prenatal plan, taking into account any medical conditions. Finally, if you both decide to proceed, use a reputable product at the lowest effective dose and monitor for any side effects. Your healthcare team knows your medical history and can provide personalized advice. Let them know why you are interested in creatine and ask whether it may benefit you. Be transparent about any kidney disease, high blood pressure, diabetes, or other conditions that could influence creatine metabolism. Also review your medication list because creatine may interact with drugs that affect kidney function. If your provider approves creatine, make sure it fits into a broader prenatal care plan that includes diet, exercise, prenatal vitamins, and any necessary interventions. Your healthcare team knows your medical history and can provide personalized advice. Let them know why you are interested in creatine and ask whether it may benefit you. Be transparent about any kidney disease, high blood pressure, diabetes, or other conditions that could influence creatine metabolism. Also review your medication list because creatine may interact with drugs that affect kidney function. If your provider approves creatine, make sure it fits into a broader prenatal care plan that includes diet, exercise, prenatal vitamins, and any necessary interventions. Your healthcare team knows your medical history and can provide personalized advice. Let them know why you are interested in creatine and ask whether it may benefit you. Be transparent about any kidney disease, high blood pressure, diabetes, or other conditions that could influence creatine metabolism. Also review your medication list because creatine may interact with drugs that affect kidney function. If your provider approves creatine, make sure it fits into a broader prenatal care plan that includes diet, exercise, prenatal vitamins, and any necessary interventions. In conclusion, creatine is a naturally occurring compound that helps regenerate cellular energy through the phosphocreatine system. During pregnancy, energy demands increase, and the placenta and fetus may use creatine to buffer energy. Animal studies highlight potential benefits including neuroprotection and multi-organ support, but human evidence is scarce. If you are pregnant or planning a pregnancy, focus on a nutritious diet, prenatal vitamins, and regular medical care. Any supplement, including creatine, should be considered cautiously and only under professional guidance. Creatine should never replace established prenatal interventions. Remember that emerging research is exciting, but it takes time to move from laboratory findings to safe, evidence based recommendations for expectant parents.